Hello. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, your host, and happy United States Memorial Day weekend, at least for us it is. But I have with me a guest from the UK. So, welcome, audience from the UK, and whatever this weekend happens to be for you, since I'm not up on my UK weekends of the summer. I don't know if you have something similar to start the summer, but this is sort of our official first weekend of summer uh, weekend, as well as a time where we are memorializing our fallen military heroes.
Sure.
So I would like to introduce Ada to you. For those of you who don't know her, you may recognize her from prior shows on this channel. We've had conversations in the past called Making Connections, where we talk about sort of culture and current events and even history, looking at it from, American perspective, UK perspective, and just kind of batting it back and forth. But today's going to be a little different, you see, because, and I'm going to let Ada introduce her own work, but she's been working hard on her own platforms. And I'm really excited to have her explain what she's been doing. And she is one of the bravest voices I know. And you guys know that I love myself to amplify people who are speaking truth. And by truth, I mean willing to ask hard questions, come what may. They're epistemically humble, and they don't mind talking to anyone and everyone, provided the discourse is civil and honest. So, welcome, Ada. How are you today?
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me today. Thank you for everyone who's joined in as well. But yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to the conversation as always. And you are absolutely right. I am always excited to just share ideas, bounce ideas back and forth with like-minded people, and even people who aren't like-minded,
Right.
because I think the most important thing is discussion, dialogue, and conversation. So thank you so much for reaching out to do this again.
Yeah, of course. It's been a long time since we've spoken, and so many things have happened. But let's find out more about what you're working on. Now, your platform on YouTube is called the Different Voice, or is it the Different Voice Initiative or Different Voices
Yes.
Initiative? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, first of all, what's happening in the UK? I know it's Memorial Weekend there, but in the UK soon, what's kind of starting off our summer is the Queen's Jubilee, which is happening next week. So the Queen's Jubilee is basically a platinum jubilee. So the Queen has officially reigned in the UK for 70 years. So there's kind of a celebration going on around that next week. So we have kind of a long weekend, the Thursday, Friday, that's going to be happening here in the UK. So
That's
just
wild. But you know what? I do want to ask you, and obviously you can only speak for yourself or your own sort of observations, but we in the United States have this bizarre love-hate relationship with the monarchy. A lot of people will say, this is ridiculous to have a monarchy and it steals money from the taxpayers, blah, blah, blah. And then you have other people who are just hanging on their every word and movement. And even the ones they hate, like Meghan Markle, they can't resist watching everything there is to watch about her, her psychology. Like, people are sort of obsessed with it. But I've always been curious, what someone who lives in the UK thinks about the monarchy. And these things tend to be really exciting events, and I have a feeling we in the United States don't fully understand. So whenever we comment, we're commenting like out of left field compared to how it's perceived there. So what can you tell us?
yeah, I think there is differences of thoughts and opinions when it comes to the monarchy in the UK. The primary reason is because the UK has sort of moved away from that. Well, yeah, I would say homogeneity, and we've become sort of that multicultural, exactly like the US. So, with the influx, and the importation of other cultures that's kind of blended in with the British culture, I think that that's what brings that difference of, views in terms of the monarchy. So you have people who are sort of indifferent to the monarchy. You have those who are anti royalists, so they're anti sort of any establishment anyway, so the monarchy sort of goes into that. Then you have those who believe that the monarchy is responsible for a lot of the tragedies behind a lot of the past colonization. They were intertwined with the slave trade, so you have that kind of um I would say distancing from that establishment. Then you have those who love the monarchy, love the queen, love the royal family, follow the royal family. And I think for that group, I think the royal family is trying to sort of modernize themselves and keep themselves within the times. And that's why you have, or you had people like, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So they kind of changed things up a little bit. But the scandals obviously haven't helped as much. Things with Prince Andrew and so on and so forth. The squabbling between Prince Harry and Prince William. So I think it's a very complex institution, and that's why a lot of people have a lot of complex feelings about it. So it's a little bit similar to the US, even though we live in the UK, not a lot of people know what to make of it. But these kind of celebrations sort of brings everyone together anyway, and sort of unites us in that, national spirit, whether you
There's a
are
sort of
anti or not.
continuity.
Yeah.
There's a continuity to it and a shared history, which I think has its perks. I think we may undervalue how important it is to a culture, even though the UK is so multidimensional in terms of its culture. There's something unifying about having that shared history or having something to point to that where there was continuity, even if it's like any other family or like any other institution, it's a bumpy road, right? My thing is I just individually like the queen. Like, so, and I mean, I'm sure if I knew her personally, I might feel differently because I've heard she's even a kind of a complex person and that there are things I might not like. But I do, from a distance, admire her strength and the strength of character that she has shown as she committed herself to something at a very young age, an age when most of us really don't know who the heck we are or what we want to do. And she made a commitment and she made promises and she stuck with them come hell or high water. And while that is not something I necessarily recommend to, the average civilian, the average, the average non-royal person, I think if you are carrying that weight on you, especially in a time immediately after a major world war, especially at a time when your country's economy is in shambles and where you are also, for the time being anyway, presiding over a commonwealth of nations where you have reach across the world, I think that shows an incredible amount of maturity and strength that she said, like it or not, this is my role and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I think she's done that admirably. And so many people sit back in judgment of her, but I think to myself, what the heck would I do? And especially being a mom, knowing that, your children are individuals, they're going to do what they're going to do. And she's had some disappointments in that department, let's just say. And I think too, she's carried that as well as one could expect. So I just think in that respect, I think she still stands for me as a role model of poise and
commitment,
maturity,
integrity.
commitment.
Like you mentioned, sticking to what you have taken on, which is for her to rule her country. Even though she doesn't only rule it, it's the government that's sort of in charge, but she has put herself in that position, and that's what a lot of people do admire about her. Even though there are calls to abolish the monarchy and all these things, I don't think that's actually going to work, because there are people who value those principles more than the person where that those principles inhabiting, and they recognize and sort of revere that institution rather than wondering the ins and outs of what people have done. I mean, with every hero you can find negative qualities, and with every villain you can if you search, you can find positive things. So this sort of this seeking to erase complete history because you found that this person has done this and that hasn't been as noble, I think is quite ridiculous. So other calls to remove or sort of smear Winston Churchill, I mean, people have done it even with Martin Luther King. People dig up the less favorable sides of him, and I think that's actually quite bizarre. With everyone, there's
and the flip side could also be true, right? We could look at somebody absolutely monstrous, right? We could look at a Hitler or something, or you can't imagine there's anything good about him. He's just an absolute psychopath. And then somebody might come up and say, well, he loved animals and he was a vegetarian. I mean, like, so there's, I
There's
guess,
good and evil in all of us,
yes.
as
And it's
many of
just
us
that,
say. Yeah. Sorry.
she's a complicated person. I think there's also a difference between, does the UK need a monarchy, which of course it doesn't. It
No,
doesn't really use a monarchy right now, except
no,
made for
but
tourist trade, right?
of course,
Um, but in terms of what, it's hard to measure, do the people believe they need to maintain this institution? That's a lot harder to measure objectively. Like I wouldn't even attempt it because it's so subjective. Each person's going to have a different opinion. And to your point, I don't think they're going to be very successful in asserting one subjective opinion over another in that respect. But objectively, do they need it? I mean, I don't know. What's the dollars and cents behind how much they're bringing in versus how much they're spending?
yeah.
I have no idea.
Of course,
I
they
have no
don't
idea.
need it. If you ask every Briton,
Exactly.
I'm sure the majority will say we don't, but it is part of the
Yeah.
culture. The
Right.
monarchy now is more a cultural thing rather than an institutional legal thing. That's the
Right.
fact of it, and every country has their own specific culture. So I think
Right.
if you move to abolish the monarchy, you're now interfering with the cultural state of that country now, and I think that's what people don't want, and I think that's fair. I don't think there's anything racist in preserving the culture of your country, even though yes, that country might be
Yeah.
majority white, but white people also have a right to have a culture as well. I know that's not a right thing to say, right? But yes, they do have a right to have and preserve and maintain their own culture, and it's as simple as that. I was
Well,
in a
I guess
church.
what I look at is each individual person. So like you might happen to be black or you might happen to be white in terms of appearance, like phenotype, right?
Mhm,
But each person has a right to choose what they want to culturally, associate with. The only thing we can't really do, in my personal opinion, is defy reality. Like I can't say I'm black. You can't, in terms of like
yeah.
people looking at me. But if,
Mhm,
for example, I wanted to listen to rap music all day and braid my hair and eat foods that are indigenous to Africa or something, like why shouldn't I be permitted to do that? If I genuinely enjoyed those things, if that's what I really enjoyed and made my life better, who's to say that that can't be the culture that I aside dissociate with? Because when I look at, if we're going to get down to and this is so sick, I don't like when people do this, but if you're going to get down to DNA, of like, what are you genetically? I mean, like most Americans, I'm a mutt, but I look at, like half is very specifically Jewish, Eastern
mhm,
European, specifically, I think Lithuanian, right? I don't even know what Lithuanian food is. I don't know anything about the history of Lithuania. I know almost
mhm,
nothing about that.
mhm,
And then the other half is like English, Irish, mishmash, French, a little bit of other stuff.
mhm,
And when I think of what I enjoy, you might think I was part Japanese and
mhm,
part Italian. I
mhm,
love sushi. I love opera, mostly the Italian operas. I I'm half Jewish, but I like Wagner. Oh my God, sue me.
mhm,
Like
mhm,
I love
mhm.
that. So it bugs me when people say like, white culture or black culture or this culture, or that culture, because you're literally from Africa, correct?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
okay. So now there are people in the United States who have been for they've stopped doing it now, but have been called African Americans who
Mhm,
they couldn't possibly trace back. I mean, they might be able to, but they really struggle to find out what area of Africa or even how many generations ago from
mhm.
Africa their relatives were. So are they really? Or are they a kind of American? And that's where I get these labels just don't work.
Yeah,
And I
I
wish we would just be able to say that.
yeah, I think the biggest problem in itself is separating culture in terms of the color lines. That doesn't exist. So
Right.
I will agree that there is no such thing as white culture and there is no such thing as black culture. For example,
Right.
you gave an example, phenotypically you're not black, but if I like rap music and braid my hair, but that is not even black culture. That may
Right, but
be
I'm just
that.
saying, like,
No,
somebody might claim it,
of course,
Yeah.
yeah. But for example, I'm Nigerian, and that may not a Nigerian culture is not the same as a Caribbean culture, and it's not even the same as someone in America, right? So these
Right.
color labels, anyway, don't make sense at all. You don't have a white culture, you have an American culture. You can't have a white culture because I don't think you have the same culture as someone from Norway. I was going to say
Right.
Poland, but I think you have some roots or something. I don't know if it's you I spoke to in Poland, maybe not you
Well, I
then.
mean, depending where they drew the line between
Yeah,
Lithuania and, it's like,
you
in
know,
those days, they kept drawing the lines all over the place. So
right?
it's possible I had some relatives in
Right.
Poland.
So
Very
I
possible.
agree that it is your culture should be something that you identify with, and these separation of, this is, Asian is more specific, but white or black, definitely, or brown, which we say a lot in the UK. I don't know if they say it much there. I think
They
that's
do
where
too. Yeah.
it loses a lot of sense.
And
Yeah.
sometimes when they say brown, then they'll say, well, we don't include Asian.
Mhm.
Another thing about Asia is a continent.
It
So
is.
are we talking about people from India? Are we
Or
talking about people
China.
from Vietnam, China,
Exactly.
Korea, North or South? And I know that the specific cultures, like the Japanese and the Chinese culture, are
Completely different.
very different. And
Completely different. The mindset, the values, completely different.
so it's
Yeah.
it's just absurd that people would be labeling, oh, this is Asian, this is that. And are there some generalizations maybe that you could make? Like, for example, you could say that, you know, Jewish culture tends to value education very highly. So you'll have a disproportionate number of people from that background who are very high achieving academically because their parents or grandparents, whatever, have valued it very highly. But is this culture, or is this a reflection of values? Is this a reflection of values that really anyone could adopt? Right?
I think that's the point. Yeah. Because, for
That's
example,
values. That's not culture.
yeah, I definitely agree with you. And it's so funny that we make, statistics and overgeneralized sort of data on these groups. Like you mentioned, what do we mean when we say Asian? Because I tell you now, in I had this culture shock even within the UK, because I grew up in a place called Birmingham, and Birmingham is 23 to 30% South Asian, the demographic. It's highly populated with South Asian, so people from Pakistan, people from India, Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. So in Birmingham, anytime you say Asian, you mean from South Asian, just automatically. Oh, my boyfriend is Asian, my teacher is Asian. You automatically think that. When I moved to London, I found that it was the complete opposite. When I was talking about Asian, people would always think that I was talking about someone from East Asia because the demographic here is a little bit different. And yet we make these assumptions on groups based on these labels in the first place. And I think that's a big problem with this as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree.
Mm.
Now, one thing I wanted to catch up with you on, if you're dialed into it, and maybe you are, maybe you're not, I'm not sure, but I've been covering the gender ideology stuff, and of course, the UK was, I hate to use the expression ahead of us, but I mean, historically, we were getting news in the United States about gender clinics and things happening and big clusters of rapid onset gender dysphoria, especially in girls and so forth
Mhm.
in the UK. Before we started hearing about it in the United States, it seemed to be like we were following. And now it's exploded here to the
Mhm.
point where it's exceeding what's gone on in the UK. But I'm hearing that the UK, to a certain degree, is like waking up, similar to some of the Northern European countries that are banning the surgeries and the administration of the hormones. And I'm hearing rumblings from the UK. But then just today, I
Mhm.
saw a piece of news
Mhm.
saying that Home Office is working on legislation to ramp up hate crime, punishments that could, in fact, put somebody like Ricky Gervais in jail
Mm.
for his comments about trans people in his comedy special. And I'm just like, what's happening over there? It seemed like things were, like people were starting to catch on and say, okay, this is not freedom. But then I saw a couple weeks ago the protests where women were being attacked by biological males,
Mm.
calling themselves women, and they were physically attacking them, verbally attacking them, threatening their lives. And I'm just aghast. This is coming here, but I'm wondering, what do you see yourself there?
Yeah, so it is definitely similar there. You know, there is weirdly enough legislation and, you know, sort of the area of speech is that we're trying to sort of regulate that. But I do think people are waking up as well. There is a movement by a women's group called Respect My Sex. I don't know if you heard of it.
Mm-mm.
It's called Respect My Sex If You Want My Ex, and it's really great, gaining a lot of traction. It is gaining a lot of traction in, you know, in within the politicians as well. And it's basically a movement formed by a coalition of three women's groups. So one, I think, is called Women's Uniting, one is called Sex Matters, another one's called Women's Rights Network. And they basically formed because they were sick of all this narrative surrounding, you know, transgenderism and the denial of biology in the first place. And they saw that, you know, because of this, their rights were being encroached on. Changes were happening in sports, you know, changes were happening in education, within their own, you know, single sex spaces like changing rooms, toilets. So there
Right.
was one of our councils, they spent, I think, £250,000, you know, refurbishing public toilet spaces to be inclusive to, you know, neutral, gender neutral people. But that could mean that someone who was biologically born male, you know, could use that space as, you know, as a woman, right? So that is definitely happening, and that's just basically a campaign to challenge the politicians that if they want, the X signifies, that's how, you know, when we vote we put the X, right? So if you want my X, if you want my vote, how can you demonstrate to me that you are doing all you can to protect women's rights in public spaces, in schools, in sports, and so on and so forth? And like I said, that is gaining a lot of traction. And I don't know this specific case, but I think it's in Oxford Council. I think there was a push for you know, telling children that there's no such thing as, they don't need to use boys and girls anymore, something like that. And I think this group, this campaigning group got involved. He went to court, and they won as well. It was a school in Oxfordshire Council, I can't
Mhm.
remember. So there is a lot of pushback against it. Of course it is difficult because, you know, the justice warriors, you know, working full time, like you mentioned, Ricky Gervais, to, you know, mess up comedy, you know, mess up common sense, really. So it is a fight, but I think the fight is happening
Okay.
in the UK.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, it is a little frightening how far it's gone and how much credence is still given to people who are essentially saying, I demand that you ignore reality. I demand that you validate my neurosis or my particular desire to live my life a certain way. We've gone way past don't pick on me because I'm different. You know, don't harass me or discriminate against me or treat me poorly in inhumane ways because I was born a male and I feel like living my life looking cosmetically like a female. Okay, because that's really what we're talking about right now for most, to the point where now I don't even feel a compunction to look cosmetically like a female. I just want you to respect the fact that I declare myself one, and if you don't agree with me or you don't bend the knee to my
Mm,
demand that you treat me as something that I'm not, I'm going to harass you, bully you, beat you up, call you names, start threaten your life, etc. And it is beyond my comprehension that in a country like, you know, England or in the UK, that they would, that this hasn't been already shamed out of existence, that this we've just gone round the bend, as they would say. And am seeing it here as well. And I think what's next is going to be, we already see people saying, I'm a cat, I'm a dog, you know, I'm an animal. And how far until I'm black? I
yeah,
identify as black. I'm black. You have to treat me that way. Or you know what? Age is a social construct. I am now a senior citizen and I'm going to start drawing down on my retirement funds. Tell me I can't. I mean, if as
exactly.
long as we're rejecting reality, is like, you know, that's, you say, well, you can't reject chronological age. I'm like, someone is rejecting their own penis. It's literally attached to them. Excuse my language, but they're like,
who knew that they would come?
Right,
Sorry.
ignore my Y chromosome. Just ignore it. It's not there.
Yeah, I think exactly. I think the main point is I can summarize from what you said. The same as this campaigning group of respecting my sex and everyone else, myself, and I'm sure yourself included, we don't mind how people choose to live their life. It's just as simple as that. This is the fact of it. I've worked in places before this whole trend of transgender and so on. I've worked in places with non-binary people. I've had non-binary colleagues before, and there was literally, it wasn't a thing of, oh my gosh. It was, of course there was a curiosity, but it wasn't, they weren't, this completely different kind of human being to me. They were a human being as I am, with a
Yeah.
different lifestyle, who made different choices, and that was it. The
Yeah.
problem we have now is the self identification, and how far
Mhm.
will that go? Like you said, if someone does make the effort, look, I believe I was born in the wrong body, and it's not making an effort for society, but it's actually showing that you are actually genuine in what you believe and you think. Because
Right.
I could stand here and say that I'm a tree or whatever else. And, I can, like you said, I can say anything, and you must, it's not that you have to respect me, but you must join me with my belief and validate that I am also a tree, right?
Right.
So it's not
Exactly.
just I'm a tree, you go your way and I go my way. It's no, 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 you're not going your way. You come my way, and you must validate me by using this pronoun that I say, and all this and that and the other, right? That's
You know
where
what?
the
Someone ought
problem
to
is.
do that. Someone ought to stand in the middle of a sidewalk in London, like a busy sidewalk, with a thing that
Giving me
says,
ideas.
I'm a tree, right? And when people come in, you don't want to just walk around them. They just get in their way.
You say,
Just
no,
get
I'm
in their way.
sorry, I'm a tree.
Trees are in your way. Like you got to go around the tree.
Mm-hmm.
The tree is planted. So just like make people walk around you. In fact, no, don't move in their way. Just stay right smack in the middle of the thing. And don't move. And stick your arms like this. And then people are like, what are you doing? Like, I'm a tree. And then they're like, no, you're not. You're in my way. Like, I'm a tree. And just keep doing it. And then when they like freak out, you just be like, well, who are you to tell me I'm not a tree?
I think that's the point. I think if
Go
they just
around me.
exactly, if they just even go around you and just have a little bit of an inconvenience of you being in the way, that's one thing. But the problem is, I move where they move and block them and say, no, you can't move until you say to me that I am a tree and validate my existence. And I think that is the
Exactly.
problem. And I'm not being, I don't want to be disrespectful, but that's why sometimes when I see these non-binary and so on and so forth, and they feel this compelling, feeling to advertise, and not just advertise, but almost force that you believe who they are saying they are. You don't need to believe anything to do with me. If I come here and I tell you, Deb, I'm such a smart, intelligent, blah blah blah, that's me. You are not obligated to believe what I think about
Right.
myself.
Right.
And I think that's the main problem. Just like they don't want us to invalidate, right, or push upon them our own set of beliefs and values. I don't know why it's okay that it's fine the other way around. I just don't understand that. And it's the same with the racial thing as well. You know, I can tell you about your experience having white privilege. I can tell you about my experience having oppression, but you can't tell me otherwise. You can't tell me about your values, your own worldview, your own perspective. It's not valid because you're in a position of power. But I can tell you everything that you need to know about you, and you need to know about me as well. It's
It
interesting.
feels like we've created this is, a culture, because this is, where we may have had, Enlightenment culture, Western culture that could, be an umbrella for the Western world, so to speak. I think now we have an anti-enlightenment, anti-reason, anti-reality kind of culture that has placed a higher value on what the degree to which you can get people to bend the knee to unreason, that's power now. So it's not, and it may well be a reaction to perceived oppression or whatever, but I really think it's deeper than that. I think there's a need in enlightened people to be objective, or to be, like we went to this level of like, oh, I want to be a thinker and be open-minded. But they forgot that if you're open-minded without principles, if you're open-minded without a philosophy of life, okay, that you come back to, and you check things against, like whatever it might be. People have different things. Some people have Christianity, some people have, Aristotle, Ayn Rand, whatever. But you need to have something where you're like, does this align? Does this measure up? Whatever. Otherwise, you believe in nothing. You believe in it. Somebody comes along and gives you a song and dance that sounds, if not credible, it certainly sounds like you can't argue against it because you don't have any principles. You don't have any core principles to use as a base to argument for your argument. Then they can just run right over you with lunacy. Suddenly it can be, the earth is flat, day is night, 2 + 2 = 5. Because what are you relying on? Like for me, I rely on objective facts or reason or what I can see and prove with my 5 senses. That's mine. Okay. You're going to need to show me evidence. I'm going to need to see something that empirically demonstrates that your point is correct. Otherwise, it's your opinion. And I'm under no obligation to share your opinion, period, full stop. That's just how it is. But you have people saying, no, it's not my opinion, it's fact. And then I see all these people who ought to know better, scientists, professors, teachers, who are just like, well, who am I to argue? Who am I to say? That's what they believe. That's their truth. And I'm like, so I just.
Yeah, I think you mentioned they may feel that they are, it's a fight against oppression. But I think the problem is that you can't use oppressive tactics to fight the oppression that you're against anyway. And this statement reminds me of Brent Weinstein, and that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
When he was told, or not him specifically, but in Evergreen College, it was a thing of white students, white faculty members, administration, whatever, please take the day off school because there's going to be a day of, recognition and talking about, ethnic minority issues. And that's one line I remember from him saying that is an act of oppression in itself. You can't combat oppression using the same tactics if you feel you are so oppressed. It doesn't make sense. The aim should be to move forward together and to try as much as possible to coexist together. And I was saying recently, in a recent live myself, is that we are so advanced, as humans, we've technological advances and so on, and yet we still haven't figured out how to coexist with each other. It's just really, really bizarre. So
I wonder sometimes. I'm reading a book now called Anti-Fragile, and I think I'm trying to think what the subtitle is, by Nassim Taleb, and something like the benefits of things that benefit from chaos or something. But he talks a lot about this concept in the book, how we've advanced so far that we may have the impression that we can fix everything.
yeah.
That like Nate, we can fix nature. We can organize and control for chaos to reduce its negative impact. And he then refers to something called naive interventions, where people get so focused on, the thing they're going to do to fix the thing they don't like, that they forget that these interventions, when you
And
don't do proper risk analysis, can create much bigger problems than the thing you were trying to deal with.
mm-hmm,
And I
yeah.
think that's something we've done. We become a little too uh enamored of our own technological prowess, in particular a specific segment of our society. And people refer to them generically as the elite. Okay, but I mean, it seems like a fair name because we are talking about the top maybe 1% of the population. We're talking about people with a lot of wealth. We're talking about people with a lot of academic credentials. And yet we're also talking about people who have a smaller percentage of skin in the game, in terms of they aren't necessarily literally producing anything with their hands. They're not going to be on the receiving end of their fixes. There's a lot of things that they want to tinker with, like we're all marionettes or chess pieces, and they have an enormous amount of power, and here's the worst part, credibility, because of how enamored we are with titles and PhD and all the stuff, that they are acting like gods. They fancy themselves some kind of gods.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Don't think there's much I can add to that. I think it's, I know there's the biblical principle when God said, I give you power over all the earth, but I don't think he was so literal where we're even trying to control one another and what each other can say and what each other can think and believe. We've gone away from that. Everyone just do your own thing and mind your own business. And I think people are taking it a little bit too far now, and they're living in a way that doing your own thing means having no control or self-control or boundaries or morals, and it's just I can be anything and do anything and you just have to respect it. But that's not how a civilization survives. We can't, unfortunately, all do our every single thing and enact every single desire and compulsion within us. We know this. I'm not saying anything new. Even animals, have that sense as well.
Exactly.
But I think we are forgetting that with this age of free expression and self-expression and self-actualization, and we're not knowing that to balance that out, like you mentioned, there we must have those values and principles and commonalities keeping us in check, because we are all the same deep down. There's good and evil in all of us, and the difference is those who have the, I will not really say the power, but the willingness to constantly reflect and analyze and check themselves to make sure that their actions or inactions are not contributing to any. I don't know if that's me with all that noise. Is it me, or I
Which
can hear a
noise?
lot of noise, a lot of scraping, but I hope it's
That
not
might be
me.
my mouse.
Okay,
I
cool. That's
moved my
great.
mouse, and
I
it
just
makes a horrible noise. I need a mouse pad.
No, that's fine. I just hate
Note
when
to
it's
self: buy mouse pad. It's scraping. I'm so sorry.
No, it's not really a scraping. It's more a move, but there's
I
no
was trying
issue
to
as
get
well. Just
information from your
yeah,
site to put. I
yeah.
put your link over
Oh,
here
thank
because I
you.
want to make
Yeah,
sure people go over there too. But
yeah.
but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there's a word. The other thing I was trying to look up is the word. There is a word, and he mentions it. Of course, it escapes me because it's a big word I just learned. But there's a word for doing harm while meaning to do good. There's actually a
Wow.
vocabulary word that means that. And I knew it yesterday, and that's escaped my, like through my senior moments. But there is such a thing. And of course, today we can think of many things that would fall under that. And it's so very frustrating because when you see it, you probably feel this way too. When you see it happening, you want to tell everybody, stop. Just just don't do the thing. Do no harm. Just stop. You'll do less harm if you leave nature, or you leave, people and markets and human interactions and voluntarism and like all the things. If you just leave chaos alone,
It will work itself out. It
it,
balance, or maybe not. It will rebalance. That's the order of life. It will always rebalance itself. Nature has done fine enough without us, Deb. Oxygen, we didn't create the oxygen levels in, but it
no,
knows that it just has to be just right to not cause an explosion and not to starve us of breath of air. Nature is
yeah,
perfect.
right.
It works itself out, and there's no reason for us to try and change that dynamic by thinking that actually I must do something so that And sorry to cut you, but when you mention that, it makes me think of all the protection and protection and protection,
Yes.
especially that's trying to happen online as well. I'm sure anyone on social media, I went on my Instagram and I don't know what setting it tried to give me, and always tries to give me this. Do you want to filter hateful comments? I'm like, no, no, no,
Bring it on. Bring it
no.
on.
Like, for goodness
Please.
sake, no. If I want to filter from hateful comments, you know what I'll do? Deb, get off Instagram. Live in the real world. But as long as I'm on this platform and using this digital network, I'm here for it all. And it's just as simple as that. Don't protect me from anything, because for you to protect me from especially things like this means more surveillance, means less privacy, means you dictating what you think is hate speech, what I might find constructive criticism in the first place. Leave it alone.
I totally agree. And now we have a situation in the United States. I don't know if this is happening in the UK. Do you have something called social emotional learning focus in schools in the UK, SEL? Have you heard that term over
I
there?
haven't heard it, but that doesn't mean it may not be happening. But I personally haven't heard that specific term.
Okay, because we have it going on here, and I've been covering it on this channel, and I've been covering it with a research partner, Anne, and we're gonna have a show coming up this week, this Wednesday, about some stuff that she's found. Just to give you guys a teaser, it goes beyond. I thought it was bad because they were trying to micromanage the emotions of students all the way down to kindergarten, and check in on them constantly. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? It's like, now I'm anxious because you're up in my business constantly, right? And the fact that they can't see this, or maybe they can, and that's part of the point. But now what we're finding is we've found evidence that they are handing teachers surveys with subjective questionnaire questions to observe as children as young as 18 months
Oh, wow.
in pre-K, to make assessments about the mental health of toddlers. And that this data, that the teacher checks boxes, and questions are like, does the child seem to do this? Does the child make want to play? Does the child want this? Does the child like this? How the do they know? I mean, if I
Wow.
think back to my 18-month-old children and how dramatically different they were at 3 and then at 5, and then, I mean, these people are leading parents and teachers who obviously are not taught proper child brain development in their programs. They're leading them to believe that you can prevent mental illness with early intervention. And the intervention is cataloging and sorting and screening and screening and screening and screening and screening and surveilling and screening and screening some more children as young as 18 months of age. They are actually propagating the lie that a child of 2 to 3 months can be racist because of this eye focusing thing, which is a bogus study in the first place. But it doesn't mean you're racist if your eyes focus on your caregiver more quickly than somebody who isn't your caregiver. Okay. But they're drawing that conclusion. They're saying we can get out ahead of, they're selling it as we can prevent them from being mentally ill and racist if we get in there at 18 months of age and we start screening out for all the negatives. Then you come to find out, if you come at it from the other side, the WEF side and the side, you find out that they're not really trying to prevent anything. They're surveilling and sorting us because they have a preferred psychological makeup of a person who they deem will be most productive for the little society that they're creating. It is the creepiest stuff. I've found a research paper. I have found untold amounts of stuff. I hope this is not in the UK. If you hear anything about it in the UK, you need to like big bells of warning, because apparently this is a
It
global
is.
initiative.
Mm.
This is a global initiative. And I would liken it, it's not my term. My husband came up with this, but he said it's like psychological eugenics.
Mm. It definitely is happening in the UK. I'm sure it's probably called SEL as well, but it's definitely happening in some form in the UK. And I completely agree that it's not for the purposes of, diagnosing the child or understanding the child. It is that sorting of society, and it only serves the purposes and the interests of a few. Yeah, so I definitely agree with that.
Right. And it's really it's quite frightening. Now, lately, I'm sure you've seen in the news, we've had the school shooting situation here once again. What are they saying in your world about things like that in our world? What do you hear? Is it a lot of like, why do they have guns in America? Is it like
I
that? Or
think it's the same thing because obviously we don't have guns in the UK. And what I will say is when someone does mention that we don't have guns, the pushback is usually, well, what about the knife epidemic? So I do want to clarify that the UK doesn't have a knife crime epidemic. I just want to say that London may be high with knife crime incidents, but that's London, not the UK. So stop using that as a pushback because it's don't listen to what the media is saying. But I think it is a quite complex issue. Of course, when we're looking from here, it is just a simple thing of why can't you just get rid of the guns? These kids are dying. But I know in America it is intertwined in definitely the constitution and in the culture of some. So it's definitely more complex. And I guess it's not an well, the idea is that it's not a simple thing of, well, just get rid of all the guns. Anyway, even if that happens, I don't think it's going to go down very well in the USA because I think it is pretty much embedded in the root of the culture. But from here it is that question of, well, why is it so difficult to just get rid of the guns like we did in the UK, like we did in Australia? So I don't, I maybe you can tell me a bit more if it's as polarized as we are seeing. It's not polarized. It doesn't look so. Usually, when stuff happens in the UK, in the US, it kind of polarizes the UK, funnily enough. But I think the
yeah.
general consensus here is, well, we don't have, and it's doing well for us. So why can't they just institute the same thing?
Well, as you point out, it is very complicated. And we do have our constitutional amendment in part because, going all the way back to 1776 and the king and, all that, that the notion was, and I agree with it, that if you are not able to defend yourself, you're also not able to defend yourself against the people who have a a monopoly on force, which would be government. Government is force, after all. And since they established a country based on the principle that force is only legitimate in defense of rights, that was what they were trying to do. Then but they also were realistic and knew that you give any kind of power to people, the likelihood that eventually over time they're going to try to monopolize it and keep it and disempower the people is very high. They've read history, and so keeping the people free to bear their own arms is sort of a way of kind of keeping the government honest. Like you don't have that monopoly on force. The people can defend themselves. Now, we also are a country built out of the wilderness. I mean, unlike the UK where you have small islands, that's not to say there isn't some wilderness there. It's just, we're talking about tens of thousands of years of humankind living there in something resembling civilization with, even if it's just stone buildings, and not quite the degree of, wild animals and other things. So we are so diverse in terms of our topography, in terms of what people do with their guns. I mean, and you have a system of states that are independent and so forth. So it gets really, really complicated. And what I usually tell people is, in looking at something like this particular event, I say, why is there the rush to look at the implement of the violence and not the underlying causes? Because these things did not happen prior to the 1970s. Now, we've had guns in the United States since, as a culture, as a really big part of our culture since day one.
Mm.
And yet we didn't have school shootings since day one. We didn't have schools since day one, but we had schools at least going back into the mid to late 1800s, and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't have school shootings. In fact, one of the first most deadly school attacks was a bombing. But and you can make bombs out of all manner of things. But they became a thing at the end of the 70s and so forth. And when we start to look at the underlying similarities in these events, to me, it's impossible to ignore the common denominators. A, that they happen at schools. Why are we not looking at that? Why are we not looking at that as a common denominator? The same deranged individual who picked up this semi-automatic rifle and went into a school with helpless little kids, and this has happened multiple times. They didn't go to a shopping mall. They didn't go to a courthouse. They didn't go to, they didn't go to a bunch of different places well, actually, courthouse is a hardened target now, but they didn't go to other soft targets. Why is that? Why are the teenagers who are angry going back to the school? So I think we need to look at that. I think we need to look at the way we even secure our schools. We secure our banks and our courthouses and a whole lot of other things much more than we secure places where we're literally taking care of the most vulnerable in our society. And what we found out about this one incident is that a teacher had left a door propped open. So they had all met, and back in March, they did a whole security thing on the school with the local police force and for about active shootings. It was like March 22nd, they just did this, but they had awards that day. And one of the teachers, I'm told, I haven't gotten confirmation on this from multiple sources, but I read it one place that because their parents were coming in and going to the awards ceremony at the end of school, it was a little lackadaisical, left a side door propped open. Now, that one thing, if that hadn't happened, this shooting wouldn't have happened, because that school had certain security measures in place that were designed, doors that lock so that when the doors close, it's locked. You can only get out from the inside or with a key. So a shooter can't open a door. The windows were like you can't see in from the windows. The bathrooms aren't even externalized. They were like Jack and Jill between the classrooms. So they had done all these things. And then tragically, those very same safety mechanisms turned out to thwart the police. When they got there, they had like 19 or 20 police officers in the hallway, but the guy was now locked in a room. They needed a key to get in, or they had to shoot the way in. They couldn't see in to see who was alive or dead or at risk of them shooting their guns from the windows because those were blocked so shooters couldn't see, and so on. So these secure and the guy could move freely between classrooms because of the bathroom situation. So sometimes we have to look at, even if he had to get his guns illegally, which the Columbine shooters did, the first most famous shooting, those guns were obtained illegally, and they placed pipe bombs. Their plan was to bomb the school and shoot only the people who survived, but that didn't get out in the news, nor did the fact that they had a straw purchase. Now, what's a straw purchase? Straw purchase is when someone who is legal to purchase firearms purchases them for people who are not. Absolutely illegal in the United States, everywhere. It's illegal. The federal government and many state governments have decided they're not going to enforce that. It's too much trouble. Most of us who are pro-gun, as I am, I've been wearing my Second Amendment t-shirt, are furious because this is the source of so much illegal gun activity and crime and violence, is the straw purchases. People who have criminal records who pay someone else off to buy them a gun, or people who just do straw purchases. And if they're not going to enforce them, then it's not fair to say we need sensible gun control. It's like, well, the first step in sensible gun control is enforcing the laws you've got, which we know statistically absolutely correlate with like the Chicago gun violence, the DC gun violence. There are Black kids cut down every single day in Chicago by the dozens, but you don't see the news cameras there. And people go, it's the guns, it's the gun. No, it's the people who want to take away my guns, who refuse to enforce those laws to make it look like it's the guns. And where we have the most strict gun laws in the United States, we have the most violence. So it's very tempting because guns are scary. They are deadly. They can kill a lot of people at one time. So it's really easy to go, well, just get rid of them. But we're talking about close to 400 million firearms in the United States. It would be a statistical impossibility. Who's going to do that? And how much force and surveillance and encroachment on innocent people would you have to employ to do it? It would be tyranny of the highest order. We're talking like Tiananmen Square level craziness just to implement a gun ban. So since that's not going to happen, then you have to look at the underlying causes. I think that we are really barking up the wrong tree if we don't look at these common denominators and enforce the laws we've got. That's my take.
No, I do agree with you. I just think the difference with America is this idea that I can do it is this idea of excess self-freedom, and I will explain why. Because in Nigeria, you can own guns. There's 6 million gun owners in Nigeria, but you don't hear of mass shootings. So I'm just trying to understand why there is this idea that you can go up into a school and just obliterate 19 children.
Mhm.
And I understand the ideas of more security at these schools. However, in my own opinion, I'm not anti gun ownership, but I just don't understand that there are so many guns owned in America. This is just a personal thing. This has got nothing to do with politics. And it's
Right.
like people always say with when you give a pushback, well, a murderer will always find a way to murder, and I think that's true. But with guns, it's just so quick and easy to do a mass damage even before being stopped. I mean, we
Mhm.
have a lot of occasions in London. I mean, since the time I've been here anyway, the last 4 years, where a random person would just go on a knife rampage. But for him to be able to stab you, he must be in a close vicinity to you. And that's not the same with guns. And even if they, let's say, had that door closed, he literally could have just waited till after school. There's that rush of all the kids coming out, and he could have shut them up. So,
The thing is, I think, but you're sort of answering your own question because we have so many guns, and yet statistically, based on that per capita, we actually don't have as many mass shootings as you would expect, right? And so, for example, you don't see these at places where lots of guns are. You don't see these in states or cities where everybody's presumed to be armed. They just don't happen. And so, what I would say again is what's going on in American culture in particular, which is probably not the case in Nigeria. Now, tell me what percentage of teenage boys are growing up in Nigeria in a single mother household?
I don't know the number at the top of my head, but a lot of people in Nigeria are growing up in poverty, even with two-parent
Okay.
homes. So that there are
Poverty
social.
is right, but poverty is a little different than having no parents and role models. Like, I mean, a lot of people want to always connect poverty to crime, and I think that's very unfair. There are a
No,
lot of
I don't.
people, yeah.
I definitely don't mean it as a direct correlation,
No,
but
no, no,
I
I know.
do think it's definitely, it can be a factor.
Right.
Maybe not and I've said this before. Poverty definitely is, in my own observation, it's not a correlation for senseless crime, like let's say mass murdering or whatever. For me, all crime is senseless, but I mean it's not for random crime
Right.
incidents. It's more for a necessity. So I need to eat. So I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm going to have to rob you. If that turns
Right.
into me murdering you, I'm sorry, but I'm hungry. But this kind of crime of, I'm in poverty, but I have an iPhone. I can afford a gun, but I'm just going to shoot you because I'm poor. I think that's different. So I definitely agree with you
Yeah.
on that. And I do agree that lack of male role models and the demasculation of men anyway, the emasculation of men is definitely a huge cause. So I think there's everything that comes into it. And that's why I'm saying, I think until that's dealt with, there needs to be more stringent um regulation, in my opinion, of gun ownership, because it's just getting worse. And plus you add
And I
this.
mean, if it would work, I'll tell you what, if I really thought it would work, if there were any evidence that it has worked where it has been tried, I might even support it. The problem is there's zero. So, and in fact, there is the opposite of zero. There is strong evidence that the more we have regulated gun ownership across the board, the more innocent people have been harmed and gun crime has increased in the hands of the bad people. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at our culture. I think we need to look at what's sickening it. And in my personal opinion, this is just me. I think what you just mentioned about the emasculation of the young male, I think in particular, the young white male has been demonized, straight up demonized in our culture. The other and when that kind of demonization is a very different gun crime, like you said, random rampaging suicidal levels of murder, like I'm
Mm.
going down and my life is crap, I'm a nihilist and I'm taking you all with me. That I think is there. The other thing is to remember that we in this country, I don't know how it is in the UK, are putting our kids in front of technology as toddlers. We're sticking a phone in their hand at a restaurant or a tablet in front of their hand. We're putting them on video games. And then in the school, they're also giving them a Chromebook and having them play everything. They're gamifying everything. They're not handling real books. Now, what do we know about the human brain and neurology when you are staring at a screen?
Mhm.
You become quite literally neurologically disassociated from your body.
Exactly.
When that happens, even it happens to us adults, and you then step away from the technology, it takes some period of time to get back in touch with your own body. Do I have
Mhm.
to eat, pee, sleep? How do I feel? Like you're not connected. That level of disconnection, plus puberty, plus hormones, plus bullying, plus no father in the home, plus maybe a degree of poverty, plus playing hours and hours of horrific video games. This guy apparently, and I'm not saying video games
Of
cause, please
course.
hear me say that.
But
When
it's a combination and a
all
compounding of all these things.
there's nothing really positive, healthy, joyful, or that connects the individual who's being sort of disconnected from themselves, disconnected from joy, disconnected from the future, living in an eternal present. And if your present sucks, if you're looking at your present and it sucks and you have no even clear vision of like future because you guess what, haven't been taught jack diddly about the past. Here's the thing, guys, in order to feel hopeful about the future, you must have past perspective. You must imagine being a Black person or Black child and nobody taught you about the degree of progress made, and you were only looking at your community today, and maybe you lived in a place where there were still the residual effects of segregation or whatever poverty there, and you thought that was just as bad as it's ever been. Why are you going to hope things are going to be better in the future? You have to have seen progress. So they don't teach the past. They don't talk to you about in hopeful ways. They talked about your oppression and things are bad, things are negative, the world's coming to an end in 12 years because of the climate. Da, da, da. Now, is that going to affect everyone? Of course not. But you take some particular people and all the pieces fit together at exactly the right time and exactly the right place. And this is why I point out the statistical, really small incidents of these things. They get a lot of play in the media. So it seems like they happen every day. It seems like, oh my God, every week we have one.
Mm.
But in fact, we don't. And in fact, it's tragic and horrible. And as much as it keeps me up nights worrying about, the families of these children and other children who are going to school, obviously it's what I've dedicated my life to, getting them out of there. I still think we are missing the boat when we only focus on the guns. We're not looking at the underlying cause of the misery that is creating this random, because I'll tell you where else it shows up, not so much with guns. But have you seen the videos of people shoplifting? Of people just going into a store, let's say in California where they don't prosecute anymore,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they just walk in absolutely unafraid, giant plastic bags, Louis Vuitton, whatever, and they just sweep everything into the bags. They sweep everything. They'll punch someone on the way out there. This level of disrespect for other people, for other people's hard work, for their
Mm.
belongings, whatever. That's what's sick about our culture right now.
Yeah.
Something is very rotten
Similar
here.
here. Similar here. And
And it's all of the same sort. So the same person who goes, well, I'm going to take my guns, I'm going to just blow away a bunch of people, is the same person who objectifies others, who's become so antisocial and sociopathic for whatever reason that they don't even see other humans as humans. And that
but just
is
as
sick.
avatars. Yeah, just as
That's correct.
avatars. And I completely agree with you. And it's a weird thing I always find in the West. And when I say the West, I don't mean the whole West. I usually just mean UK, US, and maybe not so much Canada. But there is this collective social level of discontent, this weird discontent with not with life but with self.
Mhm.
And a few months ago, maybe even 6 months ago, I was just kind of comparing how people in what I call real poverty, how they think, how they are within their community. And funnily enough, it was because I was having a debate about whether poverty causes crime or not. And I say, no, it doesn't. Because what I find is that when you go to places where people are in real poverty, I say again, and when I say real poverty, I mean no access to clean water, no food, no easy way to get food if that is available. You see how they are within their community. You see how they regard human life. You see how they regard each other. You see how they regard the work of the other. There's little theft. There's little, of course, these things exist, but it's not as rampant as places like the UK and the US who blame such things as even poverty, even, social conditions. So I'm not really sure what the true cause is yet. That you can have, you know, you can have much more than the majority of the world, and yet feel your life so empty and so hopeless to the point that you can go and obliterate the lives of other people.
Mm.
I can't understand that. So yes, I do agree, because that's kind of agreeing with your point. I think in these other communities, they don't have much but each other, right? They do
Exactly.
have that network, they do have that community. And in places like the UK, especially, and the US, with this fragmentation of the family structure, I think, of course, that will mess up your sense of identity and sense of belonging, and that is the greatest poverty, in my opinion, is
Right.
that which
And
causes, yeah.
and that's another example of where they're doing harm while claiming to do good is, well, we have problems with people feeling disconnected and they don't feel they belong and they don't feel they have purpose in life. So when they come into school, first thing in kindergarten, we're going to say, identify yourself on this chart and check all these boxes and decide who you are, little 6-year old or 3-year old or whatever, when you can't even think rationally about anything. And that's not how it's done. It's like nobody sat down and said, what is identity and how is it formed? What is self-worth and how is it formed? What is, and instead they are doing everything is cosmetic. Everything is cosmetic. Oh, you want an identity? Here you go. Sticker. I
I was
am this list of identities. Or, oh, you want to feel like you're belonging? Here's the Gay Straight Alliance Club. You wanted it. It's so cosmetic and fake when
surface,
so surface when in fact real self-esteem, I believe, comes from try, fail, try, fail, try, fail, like, and
build
yes,
character.
build character. And yet that doesn't mean that, fail early, fail often, because then you have more to learn to fail better. Right. It's like you fail up, you
Hmm.
fail, you fail more productively. And then the people, I always saw my role as a teacher and as a parent to encourage rational risk taking and then rational analysis of what went wrong. And then so on. But the idea that you could protect your child from all risks and all chaos and all problems, to me, that's gross. That's like, what are you going to do? They can't live their lives. I looked at the staircase in my home when I had my third child. I had, it's a 3-story home with a big steep staircase. And I said, well, I could approach this multiple ways. I could put gates everywhere and hope no one leaves one open. That random occurrence that one of my older children leaves it open, my husband leaves it open, I leave it open. Or I can teach my child as a baby to go
Hmm.
down the stairs.
Hmm.
That's the one I chose. Now, was there the risk that she'd lose her, she wasn't going on her feet. I told her to go on her stomach, that she'd lose her balance and fall a little bit. But I thought to myself, okay, there's carpet. So that's one mitigating thing. There's me teaching her over and over to go on her tummy backwards. And wouldn't you know it, worked perfectly. She never fell down the stairs. And she learned to crawl quicker. And she learned to walk quicker than my other older two children who didn't have a house with stairs that like that. They were of that age in a different home. So they were like not having to even deal with this risk at all. Some people would be like, I'm not buying a house with stairs until my children can walk on them. And I was like, well, this is the house we can afford and it's got a big steep staircase. I guess I better deal with it. And I feel like with our schools, with our parenting, with everything, we're doing the exact opposite.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
So I don't know, but I mean, it doesn't really solve the gun violence problem, but I do think if we can get to the bottom of why people want that power in their hands. Okay, so like for example, I have firearms. I don't particularly want to use them. Like I hope I never have to, right? They're for protection. Um but so I don't pick that up without a degree of reverence. I'm going to practice. It's reverence. It's like I never want this in my hand if I'm not in a practice situation, except in a case where it is of dire need, right?
Hmm.
Something in the people who are picking up that level of power is missing. And that's filling the hole. But it's not the gun's fault. It's not the gun manufacturer's fault. It's not my fault because I support the Second Amendment. It may not be any one person's fault. It's something we need to talk about, and we need to stop yelling at each other about you're a fascist, evil murderer because you like guns, or you're a mindless nitwit because you don't. and we need to sit down and just say,
Yeah,
look, we both want the same thing,
I
fewer dead
definitely,
kids.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. And even though I don't personally think guns is a good idea in the country personally, but I do think that there is a push to de-gun America, and I don't fully know why that is yet. I'm sure you guys know, but I do see that something maybe more sinister might be going on, and because of that, that's why I say, well, maybe it's not a good idea, because why is there such a push to do that? And I say that because of, the quickness to politicize such a horrific event as this. And it does happen both sides, but of course it happens more with the left, on the left. So because that's how I'm built, that's my
Right.
attitude. When I feel that, even though I may not want that, but if I feel, but there's something else going on to remove that, that's when I'm like, so maybe it's not such a good idea. So that's my only reservation with no guns in America. I'm trying to see or understand what the bigger
Right.
picture is of, well, what is the desperation to remove those from America? But definitely, I do think that there are underlying issues, not just with this area of guns, but with everything else. There is
Mhm.
an underlying issue, and I think in a few years, I think sooner rather than later, I think there is going to be an eruption of a social identity crisis, and
Mhm.
this is due to the fact of this confusion around gender politics, race politics. Everything is just sort of bubbling, and it's going to bubble over soon, and it won't be pretty. I'm hoping it's not in my lifetime, because it will not be pretty. So it's like a
No.
training of it from young, to have people not connected to reality, to objectivity, to facts. It's disconnecting them from it. Especially we're moving to augmented reality as well. There's just so much going on with one purpose, which is to destabilize the individual. And for whatever purpose that is, I guess we're going to see one
Well,
day.
that you just said it. You said to destabilize the individual. And when somebody assigns you your identity markers and then tells you at a young age that your parents are a hindrance, your parents are not to be trusted, the secret should be kept with the teacher, the established uh supports that you thought you had when you were 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, that you be very suspicious of them because they're the old people. I mean, that's Maoism right there. You are destabilizing the individual, and
Mm.
unstable individuals do things like shoot up schools.
And they're easier to manipulate as well.
Very easy to manipulate, very easy to uh, get to do really self-destructive things in the name of stability, or in the name of an order to the chaos in their minds and their hearts. You see it with religious cults, where somebody comes in and says, I have the answer, and they'll glom onto that. And the mass suicide in Guyana that happened, that was a result of people seeking some measure of stability and continuity and
And
fellowship and
control.
so forth.
Yeah,
Well, the
something
the
they can.
head guy, yeah, control, yeah,
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
even within, in my opinion, that's why I think some people also commit. It's an element to why some people commit suicide, because they feel so powerless. Let me do something that's come from me, as horrible and as dark as it is. At least I have control of my life, kind of. So I'm going to take it, right? Which is the most
Exactly.
stupid thing. It should be I have control of my life. Let me use my reason, my intellect, my whatever, to actually make something of it. But they choose that option, I'm afraid. But
Speaking of
yeah.
reason, speaking
Mhm,
of reason and intellect,
mhm,
I'm sure you've heard it many times, the description of whiteness, and people saying that, whenever you use the word reason, when you use the word, or objectivity or whatever, oh, that's whiteness.
mhm.
How does that, I mean, I always sit back and say that is the most racist, offensive. Like, I don't offend that easily, but when I hear that, I'm just like, how is I don't understand. how every single person who is phenotypically Black is going, excuse me? Like, I would be so pissed off. Yeah, it's how I feel when people say women are totally irrational. Women can't think.
It's
Women
the
are
same thing.
it's
But
the same freaking
that's
thing.
what you're saying. If you're saying that reason is whiteness, then you're saying that lack of is blackness then, or they will
Right.
obviously, they won't say in those words, they will obviously say something else. But when such people say things like this, I just think to myself that they obviously don't travel, or they obviously don't know the world, because how do they think people in, let's say, I will always just mention Nigeria because that's where I'm from. How do they think people there do things, build things? No, I'm not going to use reason and mathematical objectivity. I think let's do that 5 centimeters or whatever. Like, we use this in our own countries as well, and I think it is racist. And I think, there, it just shows how ignorant they really are. Even things like standardized tests are racist. How this is literally the way the whole world, in one way or another, this is how they measure intelligence. Even if it might not be IQ, okay, let's measure the IQ, but
Yeah.
every country has a standard of how they sort out their own social order. So it's just the most ethnocentric thing, actually, I think. And it doesn't only just come
Totally.
from white people. I mean, Black people say this as well. And someone I follow, just for the sake of just knowing how crazy some ideas are, they say exactly the same thing. Well, you can't expect black kids to pass English exams because they don't know some of these words. And one of the examples he gave was, for example, let's say you have the word elated in an exam. Well, a Black child won't know what elated means because they don't use the word elated. And I'm just like, number one, this is why we read. This is why we read books, because most of the words I use, let's say in conversation or even during school exams, I probably didn't use it once within my siblings or whatever. So it's just the most ridiculous excuse, and it's showing the fact, and it's actually reinforcing a statistic of, for example, I think it was Asian kids spend 2 hours in homework, and Black kids spend like 30 minutes. It reinforces that idea, because if you just bump up that time a little bit more, it makes such a difference when taking these tests and everything else. So it's not a white thing. Standardization of tests, intelligence, and having to get this qualification or do this in this way, it's not a white thing. So I hate to break
It's just
it to
habits
anyone.
of excellence. And anyone, that's the beauty of them. Anyone, no matter who you are, if you are human and you have, your faculties, in other words, there's nothing organic holding you back, okay? Then you can adopt the habits of excellence. They've been well documented. You can look at Aristotle, you can look at George Washington. At the age of 8, he started writing a list of all the different things that he considered to be the habits of excellence, like that, what it would take to become a gentleman of good character. And he documented in a little notebook. You can go buy that. I mean, any person, I've met people who decided as young kids, who said, they were growing up with a single mom, or they were growing up in poverty. And they said they looked around and they saw people who had more. And they said, well, I want to be one of them. What do I do? And started getting books written by the people who had more, and started reading them. And they said, okay, or you look at like a Thomas Sowell, you look at people like this and model yourself after those people. Anyone can do it. That's the beauty of education. I mentioned the other day, I was watching a video about where a teacher was reading to kindergartners, and she was talking about the Buffalo shooting and saying how she's talking to kindergartners. Oh, I was just so sad and emotional, but there was this tiny glimmer of hope that, I can teach you kids how to think or whatever. And I thought to myself, you have to look for a tiny glimmer of hope in 5 and 6-year-olds. And it just made me kind of mad. I'm like, you are hope. Your job is hope. Your job, just teaching them how to read and write and do math, that is hope. Education is hope. Like, what are you doing? They have to look for it. I have to search high and low for hope. And it's like, here it is. It's a book. And it baffles me.
It's sad. It saddens me, because it's like, even when I watch videos of teachers saying, I just came out to my class today. And it's like, you know, it saddens me because that person, with all due respect, is not secure in themselves. And that goes back to what I said of people having to advertise their identity. And I don't care what that identity is. It could be your whiteness that you hold dear to you, or your blackness, or your religion, whether you're Muslim, Christian. If you feel this need wherever you go, oh, I'm Christian and this is how I live my life and this is how I don't live my life. Oh, I'm vegan and this is how I live my life and this is how I don't live my life. I'm gay, this is how I live my life. I don't need all that, because that's
Right.
not the interesting part of you.
Right.
How
It's
do you
really
act in
not.
trouble? How do you act with challenge? That's who I want to know. Your character, your arbitrary characteristics, your social identity markers mean nothing to me, because they are not what makes you excellent or not excellent. It's who you are, your character, your disposition, and that's it. That's where it ends, that's where it begins, that's it.
And
And
let's face it, all bigotry it can be traced back to some fear about demands the different person is going to make on the person who's bigoted. So if you are just live and let live and you are not, people who are homophobic, what was the big fear? Not that I'm not saying it was legit. I'm just saying the fear was they were going to, turn other people gay. They were going to spread disease. They were going to whatever those fears were, right? So
mm-hmm,
if you run around in people's faces going,
mm-hmm,
I'm gay, I'm gay, I'm gay, you are not only not doing anything
mm-hmm.
to dissuade people from being afraid, you're validating a lot of those fears in many cases, especially when it's like, I need to be able to talk to my students, these little tiny minor children. Then you're validating every homophobe's worst fear, that you're
Exactly.
going to try to turn children gay. Okay. Which, I mean, I hate saying the words out loud, but let's face it, when for a long time people walk around going, they will take our children, they will, whatever. And now you've got people coming out doing exactly that. The very thing that people said, this is what I'm afraid of. And everyone goes, oh, you're so backwards, you knuckle dragging troglodyte,
Mm-hmm.
stupid rube. And then now you see them on TikTok basically saying that exact thing and calling you a homophobe if you don't let them. And it's like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like we're way past the point of I just want to live my life and be left alone. And now it's like, I want to fulfill your worst fears and then flip you the bird. And
And I
that's
yeah.
hostile. That's antisocial. That's hostile. That is legitimizing bigotry.
Exactly. And just very quickly, it's I feel it's a sign of insecurity as well when you feel the need to do that. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you haven't resonated this identity marker you claim to be so confident with. I don't think you've resonated it within yourself. I don't think you've accepted it within yourself. And I say that to say, I remember, I don't know if it was California that I saw, and they were doing, you can obviously tell me, they were doing this thing called the slot walk. Was it Cali? Slot
I'm
walk.
not familiar with this.
So the slot walk is when a lot of girls, women, they oh wow, apparently they had it in London as well. Okay. Well, this is in America, I saw it. And they just basically go out and express their sexuality. So some people can be topless, it's like just a fest, and they're happy to be free, promiscuous, and just basically advertising that to the world. Now, as someone who had that kind of lifestyle when I was younger, I'm not going to go into all detail, but I didn't have the best lifestyle. And because I, didn't have stable relationships, that didn't, for me, maybe people are different, but I find that's not the case. It comes rather from a place of insecurity and an imbalance of yourself rather than confidence. And you say it's confidence, of course, because you want to show that to the world. But deep down, when you're home alone, you only know the truth. So when I see people just going out and woo, I love sex and I love to sleep with 100 men a day, I'm like, why do you feel the need to advertise that? What are you overcompensating for? An
Right.
insecurity? something that you haven't resolved within yourself. And someone else said this as well about even Christianity. Like true Christians, they kind of just live their life according to what they believe rather than having to advertise to everyone, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I go to church. Why do you feel the need? Who are you convincing? I think is what I want to ask. Are you trying to
Exactly.
convince the other, or are you trying to convince yourself? Because when you're sure of who you are, even this thing of racial identity, I don't have this thing of I'm proud to be black kind of thing, but I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my culture. Therefore, I don't need to demonize or lessen your culture to try and bring mine up. Because I'm so secure in my culture, whether you are secure or not in yours, that's literally your prerogative. I'm good with mine. But I see that there's this thing of trying to bring the so-called oppressor one down, whether that be whiteness, whether that be white culture, whether that be heterosexuality and all that. Why do you feel the need to pull that one down and raise yours up? What is missing there? I think is always my question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? The insecurity thing, I have so many questions about it because I look back at my own life and I think, well, I wasn't the most secure person, as a young adult, teenager, etc. I remember feeling very awkward, feeling I got bullied like crazy. And I keep thinking, what was different? What is different now? And I come up with a lot of the same ideas other people have, like, well, I didn't have social media constantly adding to my discomfort or telling me the million other ways I might feel, lesser than or whatever. I didn't have the literal comparisons. The comparisons were all in my head, with the exception of bullies who'd say, you're this, you're that. That's limited to when you're around them. It was,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now I imagine kids are getting, likes,
Yes.
dislikes, negative comments.
There's always that constant feedback, right? Or
It's
non-feedback. Mm-hmm.
constant.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like even those who try to escape it, or even those whose parents don't allow them to have social media, like my kids didn't have social media, and one of my daughters was getting bullied using text messages and social media accounts of other people. So then she'd hear from friends, this is what's being said on Instagram, this is what's being said. So then you have the double whammy of it's happening, and you can't see it, so you imagine the worst, and of course you don't really want to go see it. That's not going to make it any better. And it's just inescapable in a way that's different from when we were kids or even
Mm.
young adults. And I really feel for them. I think that's incredibly difficult, and we haven't evolved as human animals to the point where I think we're able yet, at that age, to make sense of it. You're biologically geared towards, I'm going through puberty, this is all very awkward, massive changes really quickly, and you're getting too much feedback too fast about what it all means from people who do not have your best interests at heart. And then parents are trying to get in, and it's like our voices are so quiet. And I was curious, and this, if you don't need to answer because it's kind of a personal question, but you don't have children, right?
No, I don't. Not yet.
Okay. Now, as you look ahead to your own future, do you have misgivings, trepidations, concerns about having children, given everything that's going on? Or do you have thoughts about how you would go about it differently, or
It's
given
a good
everything that's
question.
happening?
It's a good question. I did for a very long time, and I didn't want children. Because I know how difficult, even though I wasn't, social media came a little bit after, but it still was in my teenage years, but it wasn't a huge part of my life. But mine was more a personal reason apart from social media, in terms of how much pain one can go through. I did go through a lot as well in during my childhood years, so it was more of that, of I knew what I went through, and I just can't imagine my child having that pain. And obviously the amount of distraction and just mess, really mess the world is in. I mean, look, the world has always been in a mess. The world has always been messy, as long as since human beings have sort of gotten hold of their intelligence, technology, tools, science, and all this. Funnily enough, right, the world has been a mess because of that constant, insatiable search for meaning, for purpose. This has existed since the beginning of time. But my problem and my fear isn't how messy the world is, but just how human beings have become, and how polarized and how unreachable the other side is to the other, if that makes sense. So it's more of that. But now, obviously, I found my partner, my fiance. I have to say, he always says that. So I think, so I think obviously that just changes. Well, it definitely changed me a lot, because you find that love, so you want to recreate that love, sort of tangibly. So and let me not get too preachy. I said this in my other live. I'm getting too preachy nowadays. I don't know what's going on, but I think the love dispels that fear, sort of, because true love comes security, and maybe people can take this from themselves as well. True love for the self as well is not this shallow concept. Is a sense of acceptance, a sense of wholeness, not perfection, because we'll never be perfect, but it's a sense of resolution. I'm good, I'm fine, things are okay, I can improve, I can grow. So all that is encompassed in love. And I think there's just that natural, I really want to recreate that in something. Obviously, some people don't recreate that with children. They might use the career, they might use their art, they might use their music, but we as humans always search for a way to express that love in a tangible form. So I guess the answer is, bring on the kids. Thank God my partner doesn't watch, he's not on YouTube or social media. don't want him to get ideas.
Well, it is sort of an act of hope. But it is challenging. I mean, my audience is made up I'd say primarily parents, but maybe not. And I have a mixture right now. I'm in a weird place of feeling like this deep sense of compassion and loyalty. I don't know if you call it loyalty, but like protectiveness over other parents and their kids, while at the same time I get so frustrated and angry with so many of them, because none of what's happening, especially in the United States, to our kids could be happening without the at least tacit consent of parents who are dropping their children off at these schools, who are saying, here, state, take care of my kids, raise my kids for me, and then coming up with 17 different excuses about why they can't do it any differently, or how it got this way, or that it's not their fault, or whatever. And I'm not saying people should go, mea culpa, it's all my fault. I'm just saying at some point you need to, it's like with kids and their parents. Well, my mom was a jerk and that's why this. And it's like, you're now an adult and you're responsible for another child. It's long past time where you can blame any of that on anyone else. You put this person on the planet, literally. It is 100% your responsibility.
Yeah.
100%. Their safety, their security, you can't prevent mental illness. You can't prevent physical illness to a certain degree. I mean, some obvious things you can do, but you can protect them against the obvious bad actors, right? And when people are coming to you and saying, look, here, see the thing with your own eyes? You see it? See the moat with the crocodiles that are crawling up in front of the school? That's like, and like, no, I'm sure they serve a purpose. Yeah. I'm sure if the school put the crocodiles there, then they serve a good purpose, don't they? Yeah. And it's like,
yeah, exactly.
So I'm torn between wanting to like help them and wanting to.
I think if we had that slogan somehow, plastered all over the world globally, I think the world would be a better place. Yeah. It might not be all my fault, but it's all my responsibility. And that will help every sector that we're seeing is messy at the moment, be it education, be it parenting, be it the racial divide, be it the gender ideology stuff. It's not all my fault, but it's all my responsibility. And it's like, the in the schools, in my opinion, it shouldn't be my opinion, but I would say my opinion, shouldn't have the responsibility for raising your child. And I
Precisely.
think that's the biggest difference in with somewhere like, let's say, Nigeria and the UK. The school the school is just there to give my child the information they need to succeed commercially, financially, but to succeed as a human being, that's on me. That's on me. And we can't outsource that responsibility to an institution, no matter how noble that institution is. And that's where we're failing. We've replaced that responsibility. The government is not responsible. I hear it all the time in the UK. When a boy gets arrested for murdering another boy, stabbing them to death in the heart, and then the mother will come on the TV and have the audacity to say, well, this happened because there aren't enough youth clubs and youth centers. Where were you? Where were you? The child may not have had a youth center, but they freaking had you. What were you doing? So, yeah.
Brilliantly stated. That was fantastic. I couldn't. I don't think we can top that. I think we're done.
I think we
I
are.
think we've just like wrapped it up with a bow, folks. With that wisdom, you are so correct. It is our children are our responsibility. So I
Yes.
cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me. It's
My
always a
pleasure.
joy
It is.
to talk to you because you have so much wisdom, and I love speaking with people who think. It's such a novelty that people use their brains. It's like, I mean, there are so many smart people who just don't turn it on. It's like,
That's all you have to do. But we all have to agree with each other and be in a nice little ideological bubble. And boring. That's boring.
no,
Like, we had
no.
disagreed a little bit actually for the first time today, but
Yeah.
how amazing it is that we can have a proper conversation and see things from a different perspective. And I just want to commend you. I'm loving that you're growing. I'm loving what you're doing with this channel. I've
Thank
pretty much
you.
followed you from when you were like hundreds. So this is, I want to
And I
personally
was so
congratulate
excited to
you.
see that you now have like your YouTube. Please, everybody, subscribe to her YouTube as well. Here is the address. It's in the comments. And I will also put it across the bottom so that you can see. But you really need to join there as well, because you have some great guests, and you talk about a wide range of topics that I think, again, if you want to hear more of what Ada has to say around everything, I mean, just a wide range of topics, if you're really craving sense, like somebody to just sit and ask questions that no one's asking, or bring something up unapologetically that, somebody might otherwise be tiptoeing around. Like, that's what I like that you do. And you're never aggressive. You're never antagonistic. You're just genuinely curious. Even today with the gun situation, where you expressed your opinion, which is shared by millions and millions of people. So it's not like, that's why I can't get upset about it, because I'm well aware that people of good faith have this view all over the world. And I've just kind of resigned myself to, that's how it is. And it's incumbent upon me to defend what I perceive to be my rights. And I better come up with principled arguments, and I better, I better make them as cogently as I can, and not just expect people to take, because it's my right, it's in the Constitution, because no, that's not working. It's not working. So if I can't explain it to someone else where they at least say, okay, well, I don't know if I agree, but at least I can understand now that you are, you're coming from a set of principles, or you're coming at it from a position that's much more complex than I thought. It's not a simple, you like to kill people and I don't,
Of course not.
or anything like that.
Of course not.
And yeah.
And I think that's what's lacking, unfortunately. Yeah. I think, like, even if I didn't know you, I wouldn't take your argument as something, that you're trying to get the better of me. And it is sad that people can't have that conversation without, oh, what you're trying to say my views are less than yours, or my
Right.
principles are worse than yours. And it's not a tit for tat thing. I feel after the Ivaldi shooting, I couldn't go on Twitter because both the conservatives and the Democrats in America were just, number one, talking about things completely unrelated just to prove their own policies and their own points. And I thought
Right.
that's just so unhuman. It's so
Right.
unhuman, so sad. And unfortunately, that's why things can't progress, even for the liberals and the conservatives,
Right.
because they're falling into that same game and moving away from reason, from
Right.
respect, from, finding that commonality. And it's come to a thing in America of, I can't be with the other side, civil war. And it's like, what? How? Whoa, how did we get there? Relax. Let's
Well,
rewind it
that's
a
the
bit.
irony of that is, how are you gonna fight that without the
Without
guns?
guns.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
You had to. All right, we get you. All right.
couldn't resist. It was just softball right out there. So
I love it.
anyway, well,
Yeah.
I hope you have a wonderful rest of your now evening.
Yes.
And I thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, comment. Helps feed the algorithm. Go subscribe to Ada's channel. She's also on Twitter at are you out the
Just
same
Ada. Yeah. Everything. Just
Ada
type in
at Ada?
Ada Akpala. You find me everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And keep the conversations going, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great day.